Misconception about AI overstates its capacities. So AI is promoted as neutral, accessible, and accurate, where there's limitations in all of those things. AI reflects the values of the people who have created it and the data sets that have informed it. It's not accessible to people across the world or even within particular countries. And it's often not particularly accurate. It's only as good as the way it's been programmed or the data it's been trained on. Now, all of these misconceptions are problematic because they incline us to put too much faith in AI. They incline governments to be too interested in innovation at the expense of good governance. And they use untold power to the tech companies that are promoting the technologies. The most important question in AI ethics right now, I think, is equity and transparency. I say equity because people are still struggling to benefit from the opportunities that AI technologies present. I was talking to a person from the Philippines not so long ago, and they're trying to do something really cool with computer vision, which is to use computer vision to look at images from satellites to track the areas that are likely to be most threatened by natural disasters. And of course, there's a lot of monsoons in the Philippines. And those researchers could not get access to satellite images to do that. They were being asked to pay large amounts of money to get the images to train the AI to help their communities. So we can't think that the benefit of new technologies are being shared across the world or within communities if we still have those sort of limitations on getting access to raw materials. And for that reason, AI is also not equitable. It's not equitable because it often is used to penalise the most disadvantaged or vulnerable people in society. We know it's often biased and unfair, but it's the benefits of the technology are also not being shared equitably or fairly across the world. ChatGPT is causing huge concern in all sorts of places. And I think it comes back to that point I made earlier that we tend to overestimate the capacities of technology. ChatGPT is not understanding language, it's recognising patterns in language. It's doing that really well, so it can appear to communicate with us reasonably well, but it's not communicating by understanding our intention, our wants, our desires. It's finding cues and patterns in the words that we enter and really just replaying those back to us, garnished by the context in which those words have been used in other places in its vast database. So it's useful, but it's not a source of understanding or meaning. It's not the catastrophic impediment to higher education, for example, that some people think. It's not going to displace lawyers, it's not going to displace journalists, provided we understand the limitations of what it can do and don't oversell, on the one hand, ChatGPT, or on the other hand, demonise or catastrophise its impact, which may, in a perverse way, allow it to take off even further. We need to approach it with a steady eye and understand its limitations and its capacities. Well, I noticed that there are lots of commercial companies that are offering to provide ways to identify ChatGPT. For example, where it's being used by students to present work, or in other contexts where the authenticity of the piece of work is essential. Now, I think that that's a losing game. I think the more we try and identify uses of ChatGPT, the more sophisticated those uses will become. So I'd be hesitant of commercial products that are trying to limit or identify ChatGPT. I think that this is the prompt for us to be all, as educators, I'm a lawyer, as lawyers, as researchers, to understand the technology, help our students understand the technology, and think creatively together about how the technology can be harnessed for the greater good without impinging on the types of activities that we may think are important and valuable in society, like assessment, education, writing important pieces of information, whether it's journalism or legal documents. The role of academia around trustworthy and responsible AI should be that academia is relatively removed from having a commercial interest to push in relation to the use of technology. So what we often see in this overhyping of AI and other digital technologies is companies trying to promote the commercial value of their innovation. It really wants to be a Silicon Valley billionaire. We've got governments very concerned to promote innovation in their jurisdictions because clearly they don't want to be left behind in some sort of technological arms race. And I think the value of academics is perhaps just to take a steady eye on these trends and perhaps be able to speak fearlessly and clearly about the genuine capacities of the technology and the types of accountability mechanisms that should be put around them to make them safe. There's at least two things that I think about in the work that I do. One of them is what AI does for relationships. We know that humans are profoundly social beings. They do best when they're interacting and relating with other humans. And one of the concerns about AI is that, in fact, it might increasingly become kind of an interface between humans. So instead of talking to other people, we talk to a chatbot, or we talk to a virtual assistant, or we interact through some app or device that's on our screen, and we're removed from ordinary and profound and meaningful human interaction. And I think that's profoundly problematic in all sorts of ways. It may be that some philosophers have become concerned that we lose the skill of interacting, of really carefully and profoundly understanding other people. And the flip side of that is that governments dehumanize essentially their populations by, instead of providing services through a human, which is often quite important if you think about schools or aged care or nursing, instead of providing those services through humans, increasingly they're going to triage them through some sort of automated system, which means often people who are the most vulnerable in society or most isolated in society are further removed and further isolated. And that would be a tragic thing, I think, for humanity. And I think the other issue around AI that concerns me is just that we normalise or desensitise ourselves to surveillance. We're increasingly being watched in various ways, whether it's through our Alexa or other virtual assistant at home, or whether it's through facial recognition technology on the streets or in the stores we're entering. And people keep saying, oh, well, privacy doesn't matter anymore. Well, I think privacy does matter, and I don't think we should let the growth of technology and the growth of surveillance technology, even if it's used sometimes for good ends, to desensitise us to the perils of undue surveillance.